Well, I want to welcome all of you to the Alamos History Association, the first meeting of our 2024-2025 season. And we will have meetings throughout the year, many of them beginning at 10:30 right here, but also we have movie nights and field trips. And those of you that are visiting with the Pilots Group, we welcome you and hope that you'll fly in every week for our History Association meetings. And we're so happy to have Umberto working with us again. Umberto makes this all happen. Now, I want to introduce, yes, Umberto. I want to introduce the president of the History Association, who is on the screen. This is Pamela Price. She's currently in Norway. And so she is going to give a welcome for our first meeting.
Okay, hello and welcome to the 30th year of a functioning History Association in Alamos. The Alamos History Club was founded in 1994 and later evolved into the more formally organized Alamos History Association. Over the years of my connection with Alamos, I've heard about Alamos ghosts, but never got around to learning about them. This Halloween day is a good time to remedy that lack, and Errol will be performing that service for us. I unfortunately will have to leave at 11 o'clock to attend a planning meeting, but I look forward to at least my first half hour of this presentation. Thank you, Errol.
Okay, thank you, Pam, thank you. Before we start the regular program, and it'll be on a PowerPoint, I want to mention a few things that are coming up for those of you that are here and will be able to participate. Next week will be our first movie evening, and we'll gather right out here at 5 o'clock, and we'll have a social hour at 6 o'clock. The movie will begin, and David Warnitz, our board member, David, there he is. David will be in charge of the presentation, which will be the movie Marcario, and we will have 4 or 5 movies during the year. And these are movies from the golden age of Mexican cinema. They all are in Spanish with English subtitles. So depending on, you'll all be able to, anyway, to enjoy them. And that will be next week, November 7th. On November 14th, we have Donna McGee here. Donna, raise your hand. There you are. Donna will be presenting one of our projects about the Alamos flood of 2007. Donna is doing research. She and our intern, we have 2 interns with the university here, Eteska and Itza, one of our interns will be here, and Donna will be presenting information on the Norbert storm of 2007. And I'm sorry, 2008. I'm thinking of the wrong year. Okay, my apologies, but she will be presenting. Well, hey, if I'm within 1 year, I'm doing good. Anyway. Okay, on November 21st, the Cabots will be hosting us at their home, and the theme will be Art in Alamos. Hal and Michael Lee Cabot have many great pictures from the artists of Alamos, many in the foreign community. And so there will be a presentation at their house, and that will be at 10:30 on November 14th. Now, then we have Thanksgiving, and then we start our December program with some other great meetings. We'll have a movie, Aventurera, on November the 5th. And that movie is another classic of the Mexican cinema, and it will be at 5 o'clock. Okay, I want to mention, if you wish to join our association, and even if you're only going to be here once or twice, we would welcome to have you as a member. As a member, you can participate in our annual meeting and vote. And also as a member or even a non-member, you can participate in one of our many committees. And of course, the project with Norbert is one of our projects that's going on, and we have many more. And that's what your dues will go to help support anyway, those projects. The dues are 400 pesos per person or 20 US dollars if you prefer. We'll take either. Oh, by the way, 3,000 Japanese yen if you have that. Thank you for mentioning that. And it will be in the museum tomorrow at the museum at, I think, 11 o'clock. They will have some guests there, an opening, but you can see the altar. Linda was putting it up yesterday, and Steve McKelvey was one of our important members, and of course he passed away last year. But each Day of the Dead, we honor a member of either the foreign community here or History Association, and Steve McKelvey will have that role this year. And his sister-in-law Denise is in the back, and so please you can say hi to her. Okay, at this time, I'm going to do the screen share, and we will start if it's all works. You can all hear me, even in the back, right? Okay, great. That's sometimes the problem. Okay, the Ghosts of Álamos. This is really based on the book by Luisa Franklin. The book was written first in 1973. A second edition came out in 1980 of the Ghosts of Álamos, and then a Spanish edition, Las Fantasmas de Álamos, came out in 1983. I have never seen the Spanish edition, but it anyway came out that year. Luisa Franklin came to Álamos. She was one of those, you've heard the story, you come to Álamos and the third day you buy a house. Well, Luisa Franklin and her husband, I can't think of his first name, Dr. Franklin, he was a dentist. They were from Prescott, Arizona, and they came to Álamos in 1956. They stayed in the Hotel Portales. They loved what they saw, and she describes it in her book. Her first book was called Las Delicias, and these things are, some of them available on Amazon, but she wrote 4 books, and any of them, those of you interested in Álamos, have a great deal of information about our community. When she came in 1956, they had no intention of buying a property, but they looked at the ruin of Las Delicias, which was on an acreage. Originally, this property, a house was built by Bartolome Almata Salido, and that was between 1859 and 1861. The house was a complete ruin. And she and her husband looked at it. Also, they had their adult son, Walter, with them, and Walter had just finished his studies in architecture. And they all decided eventually on the 5th day, they bought this property and started a long restoration. And in 1964, I think it took several years, but in 1964, she wrote about that in the book, Las Delicias. Her other books are up there, besides The Ghost of Álamos. Bride for a Silver King is historical fiction, and I'm one of those, you either write history or you write fiction, but don't try to mix them up because then we have to sort. But anyway, it is historical fiction, and there's a lot of great things about Álamos. The last book, I've not seen a copy of it, Cadillacs and Cobblestones. Oh, thank you. Got water in it. Cadillacs and Cobblestones is her memories and experiences here in Álamos. That was published in 1987. Now, the Ghosts of Álamos, which we're going to talk about today, is not available at Kathy's Corner, where other, a great source for books here in Álamos. It is available on Amazon at kind of a steep price, but several of us are fortunate enough to have a copy of the book. Now, what she did when she came here, once she got the house, she was interested in everything connected to Álamos. The manager of her property was Romulo, and he gave her a lot of information and maybe got her started on thinking about ghosts and legends. And then his son, Fernando, was very close to his grandmother, who had given him much information. So she started talking to people, and from these people that worked on her property, she talked to the servants, not only the people in town that were here and lived here, but also the servants of different foreigners that had property. And she started taking notes, and she wrote the book, The Ghosts of Álamos. One thing that's interesting, our town historian or cronista, Juan Carlos Olguin Balderrama, a few years ago said that she should have more recognition because what she did is something no one else has done about Álamos, which is to document the many legends that are a part of this town. And he said there should be a statue for her, or a street named after her, or a festival even, like the Kalaka Festival should be named for her. But he appreciated very much, and I think it's shared by the people here in Álamos. Now, her ghosts are not scary like American ghosts. People in Álamos live with ghosts. They're here. They're a part of the community. And there are people that I know. I asked Father Carpenter, who many of us know here, and he's been in Álamos, it's getting close to 40 years. And I asked him, I said, who are the ghosts? I didn't learn about them in Sunday school in the Methodist Church in Kansas, where I grew up. We never talked about ghosts. Where are the ghosts? And he said that the ghosts are the souls in purgatory, and they may be lost. But anyway, he said, when you see ghosts, pray for them. And I thought I didn't expect that kind of a reply, but I think it is good advice. So when you see a ghost, you pray for, him or her. Okay, the first part, we're going to take several sections of the book. The first part we have are legends are truer than life, and I've got that thing in the middle here. Yeah, and this was an interesting story that she had. A friend of hers, a foreigner, under her house had discovered some porcelain flowers that were just beautiful. They were white roses, and it was buried under the house. And she said, "Oh, I'd love to have some." And she put out the word in the community. And Amelia Almada, who's one of the Almada family members, came and said, "Well, I have some. I'll sell, some of these porcelain flowers to her." Well, they went to the capilla for the Almada family in the cemetery, the Pantheon. They went out there, and here were, placed very appropriately, and some porcelain flowers similar to what she wanted. But she says, "Oh, I can't." Luisa said, "I can't buy these. These are family heirlooms. They belong with the Almada family." And she said, "Well, the spirits will know where they have gone, and they will bless you, and they will understand why they are no longer within our capilla in the cemetery." Well, these were beautiful roses. She asked Milo Almada, Maximiliano Almada, who passed away during the time she was here. And she, "What is the history of these?" And he said, "Well, they could have come from Spain. The first bishop Antonio de los Reyes came here from Spain in 1783, and the church was built in 1787. But he came here, well, they had a previous church, but the new church you see today was built in 1787. And they could have come with him and his family. That is where the Almada family came. He brought his two nephews, and the rest is history. They went into mining and et cetera, et cetera. And he said they could have been blessed by the Pope. They could have been sent, by the King of Álamos to the bishop to come to the New World. And again, we don't have proof. We don't have documentation. But that's what's exciting about Álamos. There are legends that are truer than real life. Well, she goes on Day of the Dead, which is tomorrow. We have two celebrations, November 1st, November 2nd. She went there and she was afraid. She went to the capilla and she looked up and she thought there would be a bare spot, but it was filled in with additional porcelain flowers. So Luisa, never felt guilty then. Says, I didn't deprive the family. The one thing she mentions in this story is that Milo, 2 days before he died, saw the ghost, the coming to see him, a warning ghost. And he didn't only see it, but workers and people. There was a bakery near his house. The bakery that became La Moderna and is closed used to be right there on the plaza. And the workers in the bakery saw the ghost. And so, Don Milo, we'll call, went around town shaking hands, saying goodbye to all of his friends and family because he knew the ghost had come. And then 2 days later, he died. And he was the one that she took the title from, that he said, legends are truer than life. And he also said, seeing a ghost is like seeing your own soul. Now, the White Lady of Las Delicias, this is a picture of the ruin. Some of you, those who live here, of course, seen it many times. I have never been inside the gates, but this is the picture of the structure that was built by Bartolome Almada Salido in the 1860s. And he was a national figure throughout Mexico, and he passed away at a young age. Now, the White Lady of Las Delicias, there's many possibilities of who the White Lady was. Just yesterday, I sent an email out saying I'd asked for other ghost stories and none had come in. Mike Foster, who is a friend of Álamos, he lives in Bisbee. He does educational videos. He gave me a link, which I'll put on the message I send out about the meeting, about the white ghost, which could be the ghost of her house, Las Delicias. Now, when the house manager told her that the ghost was there, and he said, when you have the presence of the smell of white roses in the air, you know the ghost is there. And he hadn't been able to see her, but she was seen her reflection in mirrors. And she appeared frequently during the restoration. And anyway, Ida Luisa didn't know the whole story because there are many ghosts about white ladies. So she gave the story here of the Virgin Bride. And this may have been the ghost that is the White Lady. The Virgin Bride, as she tells the story, was a lady who was in love with her cousin, but her father had selected someone else to be her husband. And so she found all kinds of ways to postpone the wedding and, found some reason, no, we can't get married. Then eventually, she had to get married. Now, they had a big party. They had the celebration. She writes that the women of Álamos were dressed in finery from Paris. It's one of the things that when you look at the history of this community, it was rich and the people were cultured and they had quite a community which was connected to the wealth of the mines. So anyway, after the wedding party, her husband was, because of the alcohol involved, a little bit unsteady, but he mounted a horse that was dangerous, she writes, and he fell. The horse threw him, he fell, he became paralyzed, and he never moved again. And she went to, the lady, the bride, went to visit her cousin daily out at Las Galicias, and was regretting the fact that they never could have been together in marriage. Now, that's who Ida Luisa Franklin thinks this ghost might be. If you see that video, which I'll post, there are other white ladies that are ghosts. I wanted to mention the Ciudadela, which is downtown next to Bartolome School, right next to the museum. And this was the old fort. It's a very early building. It was built in the 17th century originally. And the Ciudadela is the kind of the municipality or the city, but it had several different names when it was built. And in the 18th century, it was called El Cabildo, which we still call the conference room. That just means council, but the conference room in City Hall is the Cabildo. And the first name was Atoranza, and I'm not sure what that means. But anyway, when Anza left in 1775 with soldiers and citizens to found the Presidio in San Francisco, and that it didn't start in Alamos, but the group came through Alamos. And when that happened, it was called the Cabildo. At different times, it was a prison, and for 100 years, it was a prison, and where rebellious Indians and criminals, and even the elite of the town that had run afoul of the current mayor and whatever, they might have been in prison there too. And in the dungeons there that were connected to it, there were many who died. And of course, whenever you have places where many died, you're going to have the ghosts of people trying to escape. They are trapped. Also, in the Ciudadela, there are many who died protecting Alamos from the various Indian raids. And of course, from 1853 to 1867, when there was so much turbulence all over Mexico, and Alamos was part of that. And we have the story of General Rosales, his heroic death here in 1865. So there are a lot of people, a lot of deaths connected to the Ciudadela. Now, because of that, perhaps hundreds, we know that there are ghosts there, and there have been strange footsteps. The first owner who restored it was Randolph Jenks, and then later Richard and Margot Howell took it. I don't know who owns it right now, but they all said that they heard unexplainable sounds, but they never really saw a ghost. But when Randolph Jenks opened the well, he found all kinds of human bones that were in the well. And of course, there also, it was, they stored the silver that was mined for a time. The silver that was mined in La Aduana was stored there, and some of the walls are 4.5 feet thick. But anyway, the most recent owners have not experienced the ghost, but they have experienced unusual sounds. Now, the spirits of the flood, in 2 weeks, we're going to hear about another flood, but Alamos is the Great Flood of 1869 is part of history. This picture is attributed to the Great Flood, but actually it was taken later. Juan Carlos Olguin, our cronista, pointed out that in the left center of the picture, you can see what is the jail. And the jail was finished in 1889, and the flood was 1869. So this picture, the arroyo was running, but it didn't connect to the flood. Also, the picture was taken before the Mercado was built. You see the trees there, that's the Plaza Alameda. The Mercado is at the end and it's not there. So we know the picture was taken somewhere between 1889 and 1892 or 3, but practical reasons, many people have attributed this to the flood. I'm going to finish this, and then Jim Swickard walked in, and I'm going to have Jim tell a ghost story to break up my monologue. His is much more interesting. Anyway, the spirits of the flood, she talked with the member of the Boers family, Augustine Boers, and he took her through the Boers house and the rooms at that time. Now, the Boers house is now a community center. They're working, expanding, remodeling, but at that time, it was kind of a ruin, and many of the rooms were closed off. And anyway, Don Augustine said that many of these rooms are not touched because people died there. And some of them are connected to the Great Flood of 1869. Now that flood, unlike Norbert in 2008, that flood was where the rivers overflowed. And they had, as as Augustine said, they didn't have any John Revere to warn them. 50 people were killed, 100 houses were destroyed during that flood of 1869. And because of that, there are the ghosts of the flood. Now, a lot of the ghosts of the flood will be in the wells and the tunnels, which were closed off at that time. And the ghosts might be trying to escape. But the wells, many of the wells that were destroyed in the flood of 1869 were never reopened. And the reason was the fear of the ghost, of disturbing the ghost. You see, there are some ghosts that are people trapped, but then ghosts that are below ground are connected to the devil, and they're being pulled down to hell. We have the case of the headless Chinaman coming up. And so the floods, the ghosts of the floods are not anyway the pleasant ghosts. And she mentioned that Fernando, who was Romulo's son and worked for her, he learned about the flood from his grandmother, and she told him stories. And even after she died, she went with him and talked to him as he went about town. And, he just grew to know that her presence was still there. And Fernando told her the real problem were the wells, because now so many people had to carry water because they would not open up the wells. And he mentioned there were also ghost sightings connected to the flood. At Rosales number 63, a woman could be heard screaming and could be seen falling into water which was no longer there. And this was that during storms, lightning. Also, when the arroyo was high, there were appearances of a woman in her rocking chair. She slept in the chair, the flood washed her away, and she's going down the arroyo, and she has been seen, and others. And he says, to this day, to the day my grandfather died, he cursed the devil for our well. But he said his grandfather forgave God for causing the flood, and some people did not, and they were angry the rest of their lives. Now, the other thing I want to mention, the chapel that was built in 1841 in La Capilla, this chapel is dedicated to Zapopan, whatever. Let's see, is that on the next one? No. The Virgin of Zapopan, who is protecting people from natural disasters. And this chapel was built in 1841. The flood was 1869. So the protection just wasn't there. I want to introduce Jim Swickard. And Jim, I'm so happy that he came because he has a story for us. Yes. No, it was rains that raised the level of the three rivers. You see, there weren't dams at that time like we have now. And so the rivers overflowed. The Mayo, the Yak, all of these rivers overflowed, and that caused the floods. Okay, Jim, I turn it over to you. Just stand right here so that your face is visible and give us a ghost story.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Humberto. I just got back from the cemetery. I took our pilot group out early this morning and went by Margot Finley's grave, Margot and Hal Finley. Years ago, well, after Margot died, Nancy and I agreed to maintain their graves. And many of you here are on the Adopt a Grave program for Alamos. So years ago, they discovered that, during Day of the Dead, the graves were cleaned and beautified and covered with flowers and so on and so forth. And then here in various areas, you would see a foreigner's grave that might not have been taken care of because there were no survivors left. And so that's how that program was developed. One person saw me out there the second time and they said, "Senor, you're here a lot today." And I said, "Yeah, but I'm not staying." I would say when I moved to Alamos, I probably didn't believe in ghosts at all. It was kind of like maybe, but I'd never seen any form of proof. So I really had no belief that they could exist. Within the first 2 years, I met Louise Franklin, was it?
Yes.
She died at about 102. She's about 100 years old when I met her. And she wrote the book on the Ghosts of Álamos. And I got a copy of that and I read all the stories and I learned about which home had this story and that story. And they were all pretty interesting. For a pilot group, I'll just give you one example. An oil man in the 50s, Jack Manning Oil, he flew a DC-3 and he came into Alamos, one of the early people, the early foreigners in the 50s, and the only one with an airplane. And Jack Manning and his wife, Pat, who were still living when we moved here in '89, would fly from Denver with a full load of furniture, everything imaginable in a DC-3, land on a clay runway out here, and then deliver it to friends in their home that they were building and so on. And then pilots will love this. Then he would get back in an empty DC-3, fly to Hermosillo, clear customs, and come back. So anyway, the Mannings bought a historic property, very large property, and there was one wall in there that just struck you as being strange. It was triangular and it kept getting wider and wider, and you'd go inside the house and there was nothing inside and so on. So during their renovation, they opened that wall and there was a skeleton of a little girl in there in a taffeta dress. That I remember the taffeta from the book. And so the story goes, she had been impregnated by her brother. The family was shamed and they put her inside the wall. Boom. Whether that ghost exists or not, I'm not sure, but evidently for Ida Louise Franklin, somebody has seen that ghost. When we bought our home in '89, we had a night watchman who did his job. He would sit in the portal all night. And one morning he said, "Senor," he said, "I just saw a black ghost dog in the portal the night before." And I said, "Show me where the dog was and show me where it went." And it went full length of the portal and then down into a blank wall in our back garden. Another night watchman gave me that same story. 10 years ahead, we're reworking that garden area, and we find what we thought at first were human bones. But the femurs of several Great Danes were there, and they were buried there, and that's where both night watchmen saw the black dog go through the wall. So that had me wondering a little bit. Before we had the hotel, Nancy and I went to the Thesaurus Hotel one night, had our usual margaritas. I'm going to say not too many that night. Because if I don't say that, you'll say, well, you're drinking, yeah, you know, but that wasn't the case. And we didn't have a night watchman year after year. We discovered the town was very secure and safe, and it was not even an issue. So with our home, we would leave at night, and through the 2 front doors, which you still see there today with ironwork, we would put a chain with a padlock on the inside. So to get in, you had to put your hands inside each of those iron windows, put your key in, and then unlock the thing. So one night we came home from the Thesaurus, and I go up on the porch, have my key, I just put it into the lock. Nancy's right here, and she flies backwards about 8 feet, had a Nikon camera, which broke, and I didn't have a clue what was going on. She said, Jim, why'd you do that to me? And I said, I didn't do anything. She said, no, it was Jim Wilson. We had a painter in town, an artist by the name of Jim Wilson. And she saw this man, and his white hair looked just like Jim. Only one problem. Jim was in Missouri. There wasn't Jim. We're talking about it. I looked full length. There wasn't a soul on the street, no one on our portal, quiet as could be. We go to bed a little bit unnerved. So the next morning, our expert on everything about Alamos was Margot Finley, the lady across the street. And I called Margot. I said, could we come over and visit with you? And she said, sure, come over. We'll have tea. And it was always a neat experience to experience Margot Finley. So we go in, and she has us sit in the living room next to a coffee table. She brings out this big photo album of residents and history of Alamos. She said, take a look at this while I go make the tea. So we're going through the pages. She comes back, and Nancy stops, and she says, that's the man that threw me off the porch. Margot says, that's exactly why I wanted you to look at my photo album. You picked out the former owner of your home. And he saw you as intruders, and he grabbed you. Okay. How many non-believers do we have? Okay, there's one. Good. I'm glad. I'm going to give you a little proof. You ready?
Yeah.
1 year ago, at 6:45, I walked from our apartment going to Cafe Agave, and my waiter looked white. He was still actually shaking a little bit. He said, oh, senor, you won't believe what just happened to me. I said, what happened, Martin? He said, well, I came to work at 6, walked over the bridge, and I just got over the bridge, and I'm looking at the old fountain, which was a mill built in the 1600s, sugar mill. And there's a little girl about that tall, standing next to the fountain, looking at the bougainvillea. I said, wow. I said, did she move or anything? He said, I was there. He said he was there several minutes. She walked across the parking area, went over to our banana plants in back of that, by the side of the garage. And he said, then she stood there until the sun came up. So I'm gonna show you what he saw from the bridge. Umberto, number 1, please. Oh, it's there. I didn't look up. Okay, see the ghost? No, you don't. And I was skeptical when he showed me this. See the little kind of oval shape right there? Right about this, there. And this is a darker image actually on my photo than the projector is showing. That's her head, that's her body. Convinced? Let's see photo number 2. This is after the sun started coming up. Then the camera took it in color. That's the black hair, the white dress. Convinced? Back there? No? Okay. A few years ago at the National, or the National Music Festival, the 9-day music festival in Alamos, we had a concert pianist here from Germany. He stayed in one of our rooms, and the next morning he was just a shambles. He saw a little girl in a white dress standing by his fireplace. And he checked out. The government put him in for the week, and he wouldn't even stay in the hotel. So this is one reason we just have not even, until today, ever talked about the ghosts. So anyway, our waiter had a lot to say about watching this girl for every bit of 10 minutes. He saw me pull this up. I was sending it to Umberto this morning so we could have it on the show. And he said, Senor, I gotta tell you about another ghost. Whoops, that's mine. Oh, that's okay. That's good. I said, well, what, pardon? Yeah, walked all the way across our kind of parking area and then ended up over at the banana trees. And it was too bad that we couldn't have had that first photo in color. He actually had a short video of the movement, which I could get a copy from him. Yeah, showing her move around. She wasn't just standing there. Yes.
So the man that pulled your wife up, he's been dead for a while, or he just died, or
Was he what?
Jim Wilson.
Jim?
No, he looked like Jim Wilson.
Yeah.
But
The guy that owned the house before you, had he been dead for a while?
yeah, he'd been dead, gosh, how long? He died before Dolly. We bought it from the estate. The home had been vacant, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. Dolly Walsh, she was a widow for some number of years. And Bill Walsh, a very prominent New York City attorney and lieutenant colonel, which I didn't know until recently. He was one of the lawyers at the Nuremberg trial. After the Nuremberg trials, they came to Mexico and bought the home in the early 50s. And that was that.
Just kind of kitty corner from your hotel, right?
I'm sorry?
Is it on your property? Part of your property? It's less.
Your current property.
It's right
Yeah,
next to the
yeah,
hotel.
the front part of the hotel was our home. The front part was the home. The wing to this side of that primary property was sold off in 1870 to a Salazar family, and we bought it back from the Salazars in about 1994. And that reunited the original home, which is 21,000 square feet under roof, including portal or porch. So the little girl appeared even one more time to one other guest. we also have a story which was related to me kind of in part by two of our early American female residents who bought the back of what used to be the Mint in the 1800s. And there was a semi-ruin there, which they rehabbed. And I told the story to a couple of our pilots when we were outside in the street. They had a bad well. It was dry. And being new to Alamos, they were not sure what they could do about it. So they visited with somebody and they said, well, put the word out that you want a well cleaner to come over and dig out your well again. So they put the word out one afternoon, not knowing if they could find a man to do that. And the next morning there was a line down the street because that well had stories about buried gold and silver, and a monk who was in charge of putting it there. Do I have a believer back there yet? This is true, and I experienced it myself. Well, indirectly. My daughter Jody and her then husband stayed in a casita in that property. They had a problem with nightly visits from a monk who stood in their room. A ghost. And they're telling me everything about it, and I'm saying, oh my gosh, I'm still not convinced. So we have breakfast that morning, and the maid that we had was illiterate. She couldn't speak a word of English. And George, my son-in-law, did speak fluent Spanish. We're having breakfast, and George is a great artist, and he did a pencil sketch about that big of the monk. He actually had a robe over his head, the whole thing, and an olla, or a large jug, by his shoulder. The maid comes out of the kitchen with the breakfast, and she looks down at his drawing. She said, that's him. I said, that's who? She said, that's the monk I see here every day when I'm working. No one else has ever seen it during the day, but for whatever reason, she had the ability to see it, and she identified the same one that they saw in their bedroom. So Nancy and I did get a glimpse of him, and intentionally we stayed in a different bedroom, and by golly we did, but a whole different perspective. He was about as high as the ceiling out in the portal. So there must be some kind of a almost like a photographic thing, like a lens that changes the perspective. I don't know, but that's all I've got.
Okay, Umberto helped me set back up here. And anyway, first of all, I didn't know if Jim could make it. And I'm so glad that he did, because what he had to say was much more interesting than I had. And I think, from listening to him, you realize once you have been in Alamos, you have a different perspective upon the supernatural than perhaps you would have had living in California or Texas or wherever else you're from. And anyway, I'm going to condense down, because we normally in the meetings, at 11:30, I want to talk about the beggar that smelled of violets. This story appeared in John Hilton's classic book called Sonora Sketchbook, published in 1947. John Hilton went around the state. He wrote of his experiences of things that happened, and he wrote as a journalist. Now, he was also an artist, and became very well known as an artist. His daughter may have passed away, but his daughter also was an artist. But he wrote the book, and I took everything that he wrote at face value. But he wrote of a lady that was in the kissing alley, and that when they walked by, they had this strong scent of violets. And it was so strong, they thought there must be violets growing under a shrub or something. They never saw anything. And the lady was asking for money, and if money was given, she would give prayers. And she would go to the church and pray. So if your mother was ill or whatever it was, she would pray. Well, during the time, John Hilton's daughter, had a friendship with her, and she told John that she was once very wealthy. Her husband was from France during the turbulence after the period of Maximilian in 1865, 1866. He was killed, he died, she became penniless. But he gave her a bottle of perfume. And that perfume smelled of violets, and it was very expensive perfume. When he gave her the bottle, he told her, "This will last your lifetime." And she told John Hilton, "Well, there's not very much left, so I know my days are numbered." And the next time he came to Alamos, she was no longer there. But here is the way Ida Louisa Franklin treats it, because she's looking at legends. Maybe this woman was not really a real woman. And she writes, and I'm going to read it because, I ought to make it larger here. Because she says, "And then it happens, from a deeply recessed doorway on your right issues the perfume of violets. You reach for silver to drop in a cup of the black-clad figure, but neither cup nor figure are there. This woman, representative of a life and time based upon culture, beauty, elegance, riches, catches, holds, and presents for us the depth of the Alamos tragedy." But it does more. If a lady of Alamos must become a beggar, she would repay each penny with prayers. If a lady of Alamos must beg, she would do it smelling of violets. Now, this is good writing. And if this doesn't tell you, I've got to read Ida Louisa Franklin, I don't know what would. The one about, here is the story, I'll just be very brief. A mule, a woodcutter that was carrying firewood into Alamos to sell, the mule just went crazy and led him over to this tree. And eventually he finds out at the tree, the base of the tree, there was the body of a child. And the mule was actually digging to show him where it was. And it was the body of a child. And he came into town, he told it to an Alamos resident. And he said, "If I had cut the tree, the spirit of that child would have inhabited the home of whoever burned the firewood." So he could not touch the tree. Instead, I think he prayed and put a, to give reverence, reburied the skeleton. The tunnels, Jim mentioned the tunnels, and we've had many presentations about the tunnels of Alamos. But one thing that I think is interesting, I'm going to mention on that, is the tunnels come from the church, go out into a circle. And the one thing that was new in reading her book that I wasn't aware, that when the new church that was built in 1787, actually it took 20 years, but it started in 1787, they had the old church inside. They built walls around the old adobe structure. And that's unusual. You don't hear of that. Usually you tear down the old, you build up the new. And according to legend, that was because underneath the floor and in the tunnel system was the wealth of the church, gold, silver, religious items, and they didn't want people to know it was there. So they put the new church on the outside and the old church. Now she tells the legend of the priest who is directing, anyway, the gray robe priest who is protecting the treasure of the church. And of course, we have many. Jim told about the people in gray robe. It's one thing to know, if you know a little of anyway Catholic history, the Jesuits were the first who came here, but they were expelled from Mexico in 1769. And so the Bishop Antonio de los Reyes was a Franciscan. So that's why we have the priests with the robes. The Indian ghost, this is a picture that's in the museum that I copied, but their firm bought one of the mines. They had a smokestack 200 and some feet high. It's not the one in the picture, but they didn't need it. They wanted to demolish it. They could not find any workers to do the job. They would not have anything to do with that smokestack. And the reason is that every evening, the ghosts of the Indians who had been mistreated were pretty much forced to work in these mines. They escaped through the smokestack and were free. And there was no one going to take down the smokestack and demolish it. So this became the Indian ghosts of the silver mines. And those, of course, are some of the miners. And there's a whole story with that. You can buy our guidebook at Kathy's Corner and get more information on the history of mining and other aspects. And it's called, Guide to Alamos History, Guia de la Historia de Alamos, that we have there. And it's bilingual. The Ghost of the Headless Chinaman, this is based on history too. Okay, I'm gonna close up in 5 minutes. But Pancho Villa, many people have attacked the town of Álamos. Pancho Villa soldiers came in 1915 and they shot up the town, looted the stores, et cetera, et cetera. And one of his generals, Pancho Villa was not there, but one of his generals knew that Pancho Villa wanted to live in this beautiful spot in one of the beautiful homes. And so in the home that is across from City Hall, it was one big home. At one time it had a silk factory, but he hid some silver and gold in a well. How interesting, these stories all come back, things hidden in wells. It was in a well, and a Chinese servant at the house knew about it and was stealing coins from it. And the devil then grabbed him by the feet and was pulling him into hell, and he called for help. And they threw a lariat, but the lariat ended up around his neck. And of course, according to legend, the devil put it there. And they pulled him up, but he lost his head in the process. And when they did get his body up, he took the head in his hands and was looking for a place that he could be healed, a hospital, and he's still there, there in the house looking for it. I'll mention, I'm going to end with this about one that's not in the book, but it's one that Carolyn and I learned about from Dolores Parker, who died here in 2010. She came to Álamos in 1989. And she always told the story. I came to Álamos so my children wouldn't put me in an old folks home. And that was maybe part of the story, but she also told people she came here to die because she was a cancer survivor. And when she came, she didn't think she had very long to live. She ended up living more than 20 years and playing such a vital part of the community. This is the living room of her home. And up to the right, there was a stairway that went up to a small room. And soon after she came here, some girls in the neighborhood said they wanted to play in her house. Oh, well, that's all right. She's doing other things. She lets the girls and they're playing. They went up the stairs to that room and they're playing. Well, when they left, she asked them, well, what were you doing? And they said, oh, we're playing with the little girl. The little girl, He says, yeah, the little girl that's up there, whatever. Well, Dolores had no idea what was going on, but she, of course, started this network. There is a network. If you see a ghost here in Álamos, you network with other people to try to determine. And she found out that a previous owner of the house was a doctor who had a handicapped daughter. And it was kind of a shame for them to take the daughter. They felt shamed. In many cultures, having a handicapped child, you feel that in a way you've been cursed. But she would be in that room. They would have guests over. She would look down at them. And occasionally she would play with people in the neighborhood. Now, Dolores started her story by saying, well, I don't believe in ghosts, but now Dolores did not admit that she saw the ghost, but people that stayed in her house did and told her about it. So anyway, that is Dolores. Dolores is on the right. That's her friend Sharon Kreider, who I hope was from Obregon and very connected. The picture at the right is Dolores and Carolyn and Elizabeth Newsom. And that was at a party here at the hacienda. Yes. Okay. Oh, there's so many connections. Well, I want to thank you all for sharing and learning about the Ghosts of Álamos. And we hope to see you all again. And for the movie night next week, if you're here, but thank you all for coming.